I've looked for them, I haven't found any. So I'm not sure where that's coming from and where it's basing it. But I do understand this policy that if you don't get
universities shouldn't be a part of the civil service as it is at the moment. Isn't that position they're taking something worth considering? Because they seem to believe strongly in it, and that is why they're embarking on this strike.
Yeah, so that's why I said I understand their argument when they say that the universities should be exempt. And the other part of that argument is when you have, so with universities in Nigeria or anywhere in the world really, sometimes you have visiting lecturers from outside the country. And how does the university then pay those lecturers through this same system? Because the system, from what I understand about it, it has, or rather it recognizes pensionable income, those sorts of things. How do you do that with foreign scholars, for example, or foreign lecturers? So they're right in identifying the reasons why they think universities should be exempt from the system. And again, they've come up with what they say is a solution. I haven't gone into what that looks like in detail, but at least they're proposing something that, okay, we're not saying we don't want to get paid through this this single system, because yes, it does allow for transparency, but we're saying that we don't want this particular one because it has XYZ problems. Here's another solution that we think will work. And that's how things get done. That's how things move forward. You sit down, you negotiate, you say, okay, this isn't going to work for us. We think this will work for us. The government should be looking at it as, okay, let's have a look at what you have. Let's see if this can bridge those gaps. But that doesn't seem to be what's happening here.
Okay, some would say if it is not one thing, it is the other. This is not the only reason they're having issues with the government.
Absolutely.
And it decided 2009, 2013, 2017, from memorandum of understanding to memoranda of action.
Even further back than that.
None of these seem to be implemented. What really should we be doing, I mean, as a people, in reacting to government's continued behavior when it comes to the issue of ASUU and its funding?
So I think it's a priority question. I think successive governments, is not just this particular administration, even the last one and the one before, I don't think they see this as enough of a priority, because if they did, we wouldn't be where we are today. They have these conversations. It almost seems like whatever agreement they have is just an agreement to end the strike.
Yeah, so that's
so
some people
nothing happens
you,
after that.
You are saying that they're playing politics with this, but should that be the case?
No,
because they keep coming and saying that we want to prioritize education, want to make sure. I mean, they come with all these huge promises, and then at the end of the day, we're back to status quo.
Yeah,
What's
but
the way
that's
out?
Yeah, but so the way out is for them to actually prioritize education. The reality is, no government that we've had in as long as I can remember has put education in the right priority that it should have. Because when you have agreements with ASUU, some of them 10 years old, that's a decade old, and you haven't implemented any of them. And then you have these recurring conversations over a period of 10, 11, 12 years. And then ASUU keeps coming back to say, we agreed on this, you haven't done this. We agreed on that, you haven't done that. And bear in mind that so when those things happen, there are going to be other issues that they raise along the line as well. So the list of issues keeps growing, and it keeps growing because they don't deal with any of the ones that have gone before. So you have this laundry list of issues that each government somehow manages to keep pushing. So we keep coming back here.
So considering this long history, how optimistic are you that this 2 weeks warning strike will really amount to something?
I don't think it will. Unfortunately, funny enough, on this show sometime last year, I think they had a strike sometime last year, and I think I mentioned
that was the last strike they had was in 2018.
Yeah. Okay. So it was 2 years ago.
It was 2 years ago.
So I remember having that. I remember having this same conversation about the strike and what it means for the country and whether or not anything would change. And I remember saying at the time that, look, my worry about this, and it's not to be pessimistic, but my worry about this is, if you look at the history, the government just seems to say, okay, fine, it's almost like they want to be able to say we've reached an agreement, without necessarily having any intention of carrying out anything that has been agreed. And it was last year, because I remember it was
The
just
last strike
before.
was November 2018.
So maybe it was maybe it was they were having conversations about going on strike at the time, because I remember it was close to the elections.
Okay.
And so I think, I'm not sure it was you or your colleague that was asking at the time that, are they doing this intentionally because it's close to the election? And I said at the time that I can understand them doing that, because
that conversation.
that's when
I
the
was
government
in
is
the
listening.
studio, yes.
Exactly. That's when the government is actually listening, because obviously there's elections at stake. But right now there are no elections at stake. So it's, and I think that's the unfortunate part, because it shouldn't take something like elections being at stake to implement things that have actually been agreed on. So ASU keeps going on these strikes, and at the end of the day, who loses out? It's the students.
That's where I was going to go next. You know, this strike. Is there any consideration by either the government or ASU in this case as to the welfare of the people? We keep talking about the falling standard of education. Cumulatively, let me see if I have that figure. Since the past 19 years that we've been having these, incessant strike, we've had 40 months. 40 months. That's almost
that's 3.5 years.
almost 2 years of
40 months, yeah.
Yeah, of strike.
That's 3.5 years, yeah.
Of strike affecting the education system in this country. So my question is basically, how are we going to handle this so it doesn't continue to derail the standard of education?
Unfortunately, there's not a lot the citizenry can do. It's the government. Because, and I say that because I'm not one to blame the government for everything. I think where we need to take responsibility, we should. But in this case, the reality is that as long as education being a priority is only lip service for most administrations in this country, then we're not going to move from here, because ASU's demands are not unreasonable, in my opinion. But I've seen some of what they're demanding for. It's not unreasonable when you look at the general standard of universities across, not even across the world, but across Africa. So it's not, again, when I say it's not unreasonable, yes, there are those demands, but how do those demands get implemented? It has to be in partnership with the government, or they have to have some sort of agreement, which they've had, but for some reason it's never been implemented. And every time they have this conversation, ASU is going on a 2-week warning strike.
I say when they will come back and have even a further one if government does nothing.
Yeah, but that's the problem. I bet you, and see, these things happen because many people in government don't have a personal stake in this. Many of their kids don't study in Nigerian universities. I'm reasonably certain of that. Because when you have students in universities whose education keeps being constantly disrupted by these strikes, you have people who spend 6 years on 4-year courses because of these strikes. So if the decision makers have their stake in that, and they know that it's going to take their children 6 years to study a 4-year course, I suspect they'll move a little bit quicker to get this thing done.
You said the citizenry cannot do it. What about a National Assembly? Can't they maybe, as a solution, enact a law that mandates, as a step towards that, officers that are serving the government not to send their children abroad to school?
Well, they can enact the law, but it's not, again, I think it would be an illegal law, because you can't really stop anyone as long as a person can afford it.
So what's the way?
You can't really stop anyone from sending their child where they want.
Do you see a way out? Because at the end of the day, we keep talking about the young people being
the
future.
But that's what I'm saying. The only way out here is for the government to take education as seriously as they say they take it.
They don't seem to be taking. So what? Instead of, are we going to stay this way? And keep going on strike after strike?
Yeah, we've been doing it for more than almost 20 years. And the reality is, I don't see it changing. And the only way, let's be brutally honest. The only way this is going to change is if government takes education seriously. Right now, they don't. That's the truth of the matter. Because if you look at, I went to a federal government secondary school in Jos. And when I saw pictures, so we're on a WhatsApp group with some of my friends, I've seen pictures rather over the last few months of what the school looks like today. And I could not believe that was the school I went to. It's so run down, and this is despite the fact that the old student associations have done certain things there, but it still looks a mess. And I say that because when I was there, that wasn't what it looked like. So if you multiply this by the number of federal government colleges across the country, and then take the same thing across universities in the country, it's not a pretty picture.
So talking of leadership now, among the crop of leaders that we have, especially those that are putting themselves forward to serve, do you see anyone? Because before you blink, the next 3 years is over, and we're talking about elections again. Do you see any likely candidates that could place education in a position of priority? Because as it seems now, we're just like, rudderless.
Well, I can't point to anyone, but what I would say is to do that, we need to look at, so if someone says he's running for president, for example, he's a former, let's say it's a former governor, former senator, I think what we then need to do is look at what that person has done in the education space, either in their state, what bills have they sponsored to improve education at the national level, those sorts of things. If these are people that haven't done any of those things, they are not going to suddenly get to Aso Rock and then decide to prioritize education. It won't happen. So as long as we have people who see education as a priority, which it should be, for the life of me, I can't understand why it's not, then again, we're just going to keep running around in circles, unfortunately.
I hope we get those leaders. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts so far.
Thank you.
All right, to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll be talking about Masab advising residents of the southern region of Nigeria on self-defense. Stay with us.
Hello and welcome to What Are You Saying? #Ways.
Is there a law that governs the tech space?
The first major law that you'll find out has to do with usage of data. It talks about how you protect the information you collect from people.
Most apps generate revenue through advertising and subscriptions.
I've seen children download 20 apps and they're using it. So what are we doing to trap them from that young age?
So it's a step-by-step process, you know.
By the end of the day, if you're trying to develop an app, whether local or international, and your user interface is pretty awesome, most people won't care where it's from. The process for getting your app on iOS is way, way, way more stressful.
Stringent, yeah.
No, stressful, not stringent. It's stressful.
Hey, what's up, guys? You're welcome to another edition of Plus Event, and I remain your host, Ifeoluwa Oshukeye.
Your absence isn't an excuse anymore, as Plus Events is all you need, as we bring you the glitz, the glamour, and loads of fun.
Oh, definitely, by no question. He's a living legend. Oh, God forbid, Holy Ghost fire, I know.
I just want to be blown away. I want to be wild.
This is 11 years of doing it.
I'm surrounded by so much positivity.
No, it's okay.
Yo, what's up, my people? It's your boy Starboy Terry. You're watching
Plus Event on Plus TV.
Stay glued to Plus TV Africa every Saturday and Sunday, 4:30 p.m. West African time.
In reaction to reports of continued attacks by headsmen in Delta, Imo, Anambra and other parts of the South and the Southeast regions of Nigeria, the movement for the actualization of the sovereign state of Biafra, MASSOB, has told the people of the regions to protect themselves against attacks from headsmen in their area. The movement went further to state that the continued attacks signaled the inexistence of security agenda of the region's governors. I still have with me Lulu Elegbe, public affairs analyst. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you.
And joining us via telephone is a security expert, Onyekachi Adekoya. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and good evening to the viewers.
Yeah, good evening. All right. Self-defense, MASSOB, do they have the right to be making such calls?
Well, everyone has the right to defend themselves, first of all. And I think when you tell people to defend yourselves, it's almost, no, admission is the wrong word. I think it points to the fact that the state has failed in that regard, because the primary responsibility of any government is protection of lives and property of the citizens. So when citizens are calling on each other to defend each other from security situation or attacks and those sorts of things, it points to the fact that the government has failed in its number one responsibility. And all you need to do, and this is not, it's not a political, it's not an APC, PDP thing. The reality is that too many Nigerians are being killed and too many Nigerians are being attacked without consequence. So when, whether it's MASSOB or any other group calls on people from their region of the country to defend themselves against these attacks, it was always going to happen. There's nothing surprising about it.
Onyekachi, let me come to you with the question. This is not the first time we're hearing defend yourself, defend yourself. Not so long ago, we had a former chief of staff, that's Theophilus Danjuma. He, sometime in March 2018, also made the same call, alluding that the people that are supposed to be taking care of our security are not doing so, so we should take care of ourselves. With this call from MASSOB, and considering the fact that they are alleging that so much is going on in the region that's being ignored, what's your position?
My position would just be that everyone has a right to enjoy his property with peace. So the right to self-defense is enshrined in the Constitution of the Republic of Nigeria, but that right also has its limits. But I guess what the call seeks to address is more or less calling people to a collaborative approach towards security. More so when you look at the state of unrest in that region, Enugu, Delta, the fact is the number of incidences that are happening that perhaps is giving people some sort of concern.
So some are arguing that, just sorry to interrupt, but some are arguing that this might be an exaggeration of what is truly the reality on the ground when it comes to attacks by alleged headsmen or bandits. From your position as a security consultant, do you think that there is some truth to the assertion that bandits are taking over these states already mentioned, Delta, Imo, Anambra, and other parts?
Well, there's some problem there. My mom is from Abia State, for example. I'm married to someone from Delta. Delta, I go to the specific. I travel this country every now and then. We also glean information off of open media and the reports suggest that there's been an uptick in the last 5 years in the incidents of headers, reported Fulani clashes, kidnapping, people unable to go to their farms, and the host communities are becoming a bit more restive. So I mean, someone once said, if you don't raise dust, people won't raise eyebrow. So there's cause for concern, genuine cause for concern. If you travel to these remote communities, particularly around Enugu and Delta, I think the problem is getting to an alarming stage. So there's cause for that call for people to join hands with their neighbors to help address the issue of insecurity, whichever way best they can, as long as they're within the limits of the law.
Okay, Lelu, is it possible that the leaders of the Southeast, as is being accused by MASSOB now, maybe unintentionally, including the federal government, neglecting these issues that Onyekachi is saying is possibly happening in these parts that is not the Northeast? Are we neglecting this area because of the focus on insurgency and headsmen in other parts?
Well, yes, because the military, the security services generally is quite, our security services are stretched, let's be fair. Yes, there's a lot of focus on the Northeast for obvious reasons. But at the same time, the fact that these attacks in other parts of the country are not new. They're not a year, they're not 2 years old. They've been going on for a while now, and they've only got, I think, they've only gotten worse as we've gone on. So there has to be, or I would assume there would be certain conversations had in certain circles within the government, within the security services of the country, on how to address this. Because you can't say because we're focused on one side, we're going to ignore what's happening on the other side. I can understand being stretched. I can understand that the security services cannot be everywhere at the same time. I get that. But when you have attacks happening on the scale that we're talking about, I mean, we hear these stories all the time. So that is worrying enough. But I think on the flip side, when you have, I mean, even forget about MASSOB, when you have people waking up one day and saying, you know what, we're going to defend ourselves because the security services are not doing that, it's a slippery slope, because then it opens the door to all sorts of things, to jungle justice, to people killing without due process. It opens the door to all sorts of things.
Well, we do have Amotekun at the moment, and this is an effort of state governors. He is saying, we do know also that the Southeast, they are already talking about creating their own security outfit, but MASSOB is saying that there is no seriousness in the effort. Isn't he being hasty? I'll come to you, Onyekachi. Isn't he being hasty, or rather, isn't the group being hasty, considering the fact that when Amotekun was announced, there were issues, controversies around it. One was the issue of legitimacy. It had to go through the Houses of Assemblies to get its legitimacy. So isn't he being hasty when he accuses the Southeast governors of not being sincere? Hello, do we have you on the line, Onyekachi?
Oh, no, I thought you were speaking. So,
no, I was actually taking the question to you. Did you get it?
Yes, I got the question.
Okay.
There's no haste. There's no haste. There's an adage in Yoruba language that says, don't join any.
Please translate that for us.
So what it means is that if you, for example, there's a fire, and the fire is burning you and your child, you first take care of yourself before you get to the child. So there's a sense of urgency. And even from the outside, we don't get the sense that there's a sense of cohesion amongst the Southeast governors. And again, it's something innate within the people from my mother's side. They hardly agree on issues. So I think the political divide, you have ABGA, you have APC, PDP within that axis, and they're finding it difficult to agree on a best approach. But you talked about Amotekun. Amotekun is a child of necessity. And of course, there were issues of law.
It's also about self-protection. Community policing is part of protecting yourself, is it not?
It's about self-preservation. It's about self-protection, yes, but you must look at the source of risk. Desertification, climate change, famine in Niger, in Chad, the Lake Chad Basin drying up. These incursions would only continue. And I was listening to Senator Kwaramadu speak the other day on one of his TV stations, and he said, by his own estimations, he doesn't see this issue going away anytime soon. So he's proposed a state police. He's proposing a state police bill to bring policing down to the people. So, I mean, at the crux of this whole matter is people are dying. We have become numb to people dying.
Okay, finish your thought. Finish your thought.
So it's 5 today, it's 20 tomorrow, it's 30. You know, and people don't have a sense that these are human lives. So I agree with the guest there that it's indicative of a failure of governance and a failure of leadership on the part of the Southeast governor to not be dealing with the issues with this level of seriousness that it requires at this time.
Okay, I was going to ask you a submission that was made by Mossab. They were talking about making reference to the Niger Delta militant groups, MEND. Now, this is time for them to wake up. Considering that these were militant group and there is no similarity with the likes of Amotekun as we have them now, isn't that you know, working at cross purpose of protecting the people? Because we know that these groups, let me come to you instead. We know that these groups have a tendency to cause mayhem.
Yeah, so that goes to the point I made earlier about this opening the doors to other things that we really don't want. So whether it's Mossab, whether it's IPOB or any of these groups, we all know what their agenda is or their agendas are. And the reality is when we've gotten to a point where they are the ones calling for self-defense because people are dying, then that's a very bad place to be as a country. So what you're going to have a situation where people who don't even agree with their reason for existence, any of these groups, would actually listen to their call for self-defense because they know that that's true. They say even a broken clock is right twice a day. So whether or not you agree with Mossab or any of these people, they're not wrong in calling for self-defense. Because the reality is the government has not done a good job in doing that. People are dying every day. It's too, and I think I agree with the gentleman on the phone. We've become so numb to these things that it's right now. It just seems like it's numbers. So in the news today, you hear that gunmen attacked 30 people in Kaduna. Tomorrow, you hear that herdsmen killed 50 people in Jos. The day after that, you hear that herdsmen attacked 20 people in a village. And if we're not careful, I think we're pretty much there. The only thing we hear are the numbers. We're forgetting the fact that these numbers are actually tied to human beings. And I think that desensitization is starting to eat deep into the system here. And that's a bad place to be. So if these groups that in some cases have been proscribed, most Nigerians have their issues with them. If they're calling for this, and they're not wrong in calling for this, what I hope doesn't happen.
What's the danger in that when a group that is proscribed is speaking to the minds of people who feel that they are not secured? Wouldn't that, sort of sway people to their direction?
Yeah, but so that's the worry, because you start to, even people that don't take them seriously normally, when they're calling for something like this, it makes them take a second look that, okay, maybe they're not all bad. Maybe they have a point. Maybe I should listen to what they're saying. And that's my point. That's where we shouldn't be. That's where we don't want to be as a country.
All right, let me ask you, Onyekachi, what should be the response of the governors in these regions that have been mentioned, the South and the Southeast, to this latest statement that people should defend themselves?
Well, so I think the issues, first of all, is beyond myself or IPOB or MEND or the Avengers, anything they call themselves. These are issues of governance we are dealing with. And my position has always been that the governor should begin to move towards state policing. The community policing as proposed by the federal government, some have argued is just cosmetic, as it were, doesn't address the issues of policing. I'll give you an example. We don't have more than 100,000, maybe 110,000 military personnel. We barely have 302 or 310,000 policemen for a nation of over 200 million people, having over 774 local governments. The number is just is barely enough. And the police, almost 60 to 70% of them are protecting private interests. So the police themselves are stretched, and we can see clearly that the numbers are not there. So the governors must show leadership and bring leadership to the table. This is what the people are craving for. So this is beyond MASOB, IPOB, and these other things that we're talking about here.
All right, your final thoughts on this.
Well, like I said, I think the government needs to. It's an accident waiting to happen, where people start to get up to defend themselves because the government cannot, is not a place any country wants to be. If you look all through history, it's never ended well, and that's my worry here.
All right, I'm afraid that's where we'll have to stop. Thank you very much, Onyekachi Adekoya, security expert, for joining us via telephone. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, Lulu, a pleasure always to have you in the studio. All right, well, we'll take our PLOS reports now, and when we return, I'll be giving my take. Stay with us.
The proposed Protection from Internet Falsehoods, Manipulations and Other Related Matters Bill 2019, otherwise known as the Social Media Bill, has received strong condemnation from stakeholders during the public hearing in Abuja. Several persons and groups expressed worry over the impact the bill will have on free speech, media houses, journalists, and other online users if passed by the Senate.